Welcome back to another episode of Through Their Eyes. We're excited that you're here. If you're new to this, we'll kind of give you a little bit of information about what we do. During the summer, our hosts for Scattered Abroad are asked to take the summer off. There are a lot of vacation Bible schools, camps, gospel meetings, other events that take place during the summer where local work and ministry becomes very, very hectic. And we didn't want our hosts to have to be worrying about getting 8 episodes recorded during the summer. And so they record 42 episodes a year if they're on the main team and the main show lineup that's weekly. And then they have the entire summer off to kind of rest. They're allowed to podcast if they want to, but they don't have anything that's scheduled to go out. And so what we did years ago when the network first started was we created 2 programs. This is one of them. It's called Through Their Eyes. And we sit down with someone and we ask for them to explain a Bible subject or a Bible passage through the lenses that they've been privileged to see that passage come to life or that principle. The Bible has always talked about the fact that truth is truth. We don't get to change what the truth is, but experience is different. And I think that that's something that we've seen on this program time and time again, that we have the opportunity to showcase that someone who has lived a certain life with a different background than my own will see a Bible verse and have a different application that's still true. And they'll be able to bring that out because of their life experience. And I may have an experience that they've not had that helps me see this verse in a little bit of a different light that still preaches the same truth. That's what makes the Bible so impressive, is that you can have so many different people approach the text and bring out the truth with different illustrations, different backgrounds, different personalities, but all the same gospel message. And so that's what we do on Through Their Eyes. And then Did That Really Happen comes out this upcoming Thursday, where we sit down with that same preacher or that same person and have them tell us some of the funnier things that have happened to them in their time as a Christian, or in the case of what we're doing this season, ministry. This season's theme is my favorite Bible passage. So we asked everyone to send us some passages that they would be comfortable talking about. And now, as we stop looking at the cameras and I go to look at our guests and our panelists, we're going to go ahead and introduce them at this time. We have Wayne Rogers, who's here as always, Director of Programming, has no choice but to be here. So Wayne, thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here.
And of course, I'm here as well. This is not a hologram. I'm really here too. It's good to be here with you. And we're privileged today to have Brother Charles Cochran. Brother Charles, give an introduction to yourself, let people know who you are, and then we'll get started right into what we're talking about.
It's great to be with you in this program, and it's always a joy to share the scriptures with men like you who love the Lord, who love the Word. I am the preacher at East Ridge, been there 41 years, and it's been a great work. We continue to be encouraged by things that are going on there and just opportunities we have to reach out and serve. I have a TV program entitled Light for the Way that airs on the local TV station. And it's just a great opportunity that we have to communicate the Word of God in every way that we can.
Yeah, some of my first interactions and getting to know your preaching better was when I worked at GBN, and Light for the Way would come across my edit bay sometimes, and I'd get to see that and then watch it at GBN as well when it would come on. And certainly someone, Wayne, that's been in one location 40 plus years knows what they're doing, and at least has been privileged to have a congregation that has supported them very well and taken care of them. And it speaks a lot to your work as a minister and the quality of work that you've done. I'm excited to talk about the passage that you selected because it really does truly sum up all of how you can stay somewhere for 41 years, how you can be a Christian as long as you need to be, and the rest of your days. This is a really great Old Testament passage for New Testament application. And so what we'll do is we'll read the first verse here and we'll let you make your comments. We'll chime in when we need to. And then about halfway through, when we get halfway through this episode, we'll then read verse 6 and go that way too. But the Bible says in Proverbs 3 and verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. What comes to your mind, Brother Charles, when you think about this passage?
I guess, Michael, the reason why I've chosen this as one of my favorite verses goes a long way back. I was a student at Georgia Christian School down at Dasher, Georgia, near Valdosta. And while I was a student there, a very close friend of mine by the name of Walt Cave was diagnosed with cancer. He was about 15 years of age, and Walt struggled with cancer, and his family, his father and mother struggled with that. And as a young man, you can imagine a teenager, 15 years of age, diagnosed with incurable cancer, and was going to be something that would take his life eventually. And as he struggled with cancer, this verse became a verse that helped him through the struggle that he had with this incurable disease. He adopted the idea, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. And as I think about this verse and how it helped Walt, a young man, a teenager, to be able to face something that I think any of us, whether we be young or older, knowing that death was something that was not very far away from him, it was the trust that he developed in the Lord that made a tremendous impression upon me as I watched him take this verse, as you say, a practical application, a life application of what it means to trust in the Lord with all your heart. I go back to the words of Job, the great servant, the patriarch, when he was afflicted with all of the things with which he was dealing. And we remember how Job said, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. And I believe that that is an encouraging thought to all of us when we face the great challenges of life. And this verse is a precious, wonderful promise to all that face the struggles and the adversities of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about Job 14:1, man that is born of woman is few days and full of trouble. And we've gotten into our world's understanding something that the devil has done a great job of convincing us that when something bad happens, it's God's fault. And yet it's not. And I think you're right. As far as what I can tell, that is a beautiful depiction of what it means to trust in the Lord, is even when things don't go my way and the way that I want them to go. You think about the Apostle Paul and how he would say toward the end of his life, I want to go and be with the Lord, which is far better. That's what I'd like to do, but I'm not able to do that yet. So I'll stay where I'm needed. But then when he finally gets to that time where he says, it's time for me to go. And he says, I have been ready and I'm grateful to go and I'm excited to go. And having that understanding of, despite what is happening around Paul in that time, he never blames God, even when he had that thorn in the flesh. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10, where he asks those 3 times, please take this from me. And God says, my grace is enough for you. And Paul says, so I'll just take pleasure then in it. And when I'm weak, I'm strong. And all of that comes from an understanding of trusting in the Lord with all your heart. My own understanding is not good enough to get me where I need to be. I do struggle and see things that are unfortunate. And I hear people talk about children who get sick and die, or young people that get cancer, as you talked about. And it can be a struggle sometimes with our own understanding to say, how is that fair? But if I trust in the Lord and lean not on my own understanding, he'll tell me why it's happening. It never said that it's fair that children sometimes get sick and they pass away. But the sickness that exists is a catalyst of the sin that we brought into the world as a people through Adam and Eve, and therefore there are consequences that they are far-reaching. You think about a drunk driver who is driving and hits into the back of somebody. Those people did nothing wrong that got hit, and yet they're going to suffer the consequences of the sinful action of the driver. And so definitely think that it's incredible to point out, our own understanding is not going to be enough. We need to really focus on what the Lord is saying. And if I truly trust him, I won't question him to the degree that I sometimes question him.
When I think about Moses and how he ends his time as God's servant leading the people of Israel, his last sermon that he gives, Deuteronomy 30, it records, if you obey the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes written in the book of the law, and if you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and of course, Jesus would use those same phrase, in answering the young ruler. But you have it's the same thing. Here's wisdom from, an older Moses at that point in time and near the end of his life, and knows that he's not going into the land, but still a message for those who are, those who are going to continue on from here. Here's wisdom in the same tone of really Proverbs in that same way. obey the voice of the Lord, and it's put your trust in Him, and that's really how it's kind of emphasized with that idea, turning to Him with all your heart, with all your soul, and all of those things. So you've got that encouragement. Do these things, follow Him, give your life completely and wholly to Him, and following His word. And that's the idea. If you obey the voice. When I think of the Proverbs writer who's as a teacher to a young person, as a father to a son, as a wise counselor to someone who is moving forward in life and is going to struggle with things, here's what you need to know before you go into those things. And if we will put those things to practice in our life with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our with our being, with everything that we have, trusting in Him completely, in other words, following His will, what may, we will come out on the right side of this. And that's what, to me, that's the proverb. That's the idea. But we find it throughout Scripture. And so we find it from Moses, we find it Samuel to the Israelites later, as a judge, dealing with the children of Israel. You've got a sin that they have committed, and they're asking for him to pray to God, and he says, only fear the Lord, serve Him in truth with all your heart. And so it's the same kind of idea over and over we see in Scripture.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. That word trust, translated in verse 5, literally conveys an idea of throwing yourself on the ground face down and lying helpless. Yeah. And it pictures this servant that waits for a master's command in readiness to obey, or a defeated soldier yielding himself to the conquering general. And I love how that Wearsby put that at the end there, a defeated soldier. How often have we tried to say to God that we know what we're doing, we've got it figured out, and then we finally realize we don't. We need to yield and actually let God take over and not take control from Him. He knows what He's doing. And I think about having small children right now, and my son sometimes he tries to be an adult. He really does. He thinks he knows what he's talking about, and he'll try to tell us what we need to be doing. And I'll have to remind him, you are not the father. I've been placed into that role. Your mother's not, placed into a role of authority over you for no reason. We are in charge. You need to trust in us and let us tell you what to do and how to behave and how to grow. It doesn't work the other way around. I love the imagery that is depicted in the Bible that we are children of God. Therefore, I should have that same understanding toward Him. What else do you have to add to that?
Michael and Wayne, I believe that the situation and the experience that I was able to see as a young man, a teenager at that time, has helped me as a gospel preacher, because we've had to deal with people that had children, have had young adults that struggle with cancer. So what I was able to see in the trust and the faith in Walt was able to project me into my work and help me to see that we can learn to trust God in the midst of all kinds of trying circumstances. And when I think about my own understanding, as you all have alluded to, it may be that in my understanding, I'll ask, why? Why a young man? Why a teenager? But in my work through the years, I've seen a father and mother lose a 3-year-old child to cancer. You ask why? And the question of why is not always easily answered. It comes to trusting God, knowing that it is not His fault, knowing that God did not cause this, as you mentioned a while ago, Michael, it is because of sin that entered the world. And the answer to the question of why, human suffering, not God's will or not God directly causing that suffering or that sickness or that loss of life, but we live in a broken, sinful world. And in a broken and sinful world, the consequence of sin can strike any age, whether it be a 16, 17-year-old teenager or a 3-year-old young girl that was lost to a father and mother who stood over her bedside. And I stood beside that father and mother with their hearts broken and the loss of that little baby, knowing that it was not the fault of God. It is the fault of living in a broken, sinful world that brought the result of death upon the human race. And we need to learn in those moments to trust God that He can bring good out of even very difficult, heartbreaking situations.
Absolutely. Wayne, you have anything you want to add to that before we move to verse 6?
No, that's good stuff. I'm gonna let that stand.
I think that's a good thing to do. So here's verse 6. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Brother Charles, what comes to mind when you hear that verse?
When we think about in all of our ways and everything that happens through life, I allow God to direct my ways, trusting Him, knowing that He's always going to lead me in the right way. And if I trust Him, I can't trust everybody else. I know there are times that I, as a human father, husband, preacher, as a Christian, I may mislead people because of the weakness of the flesh. But in all of my ways, if I will trust Him, He will direct my paths, not miraculously. We don't believe in miraculous intervention of God directing our paths. But in all of our ways, He will direct us through what He has given us through His Word in the Bible, the Scriptures, if I will trust. And that's why we believe in the inerrancy of Scripture, the totality, the plenary view of inspiration of the Bible. In all of my ways, if I will commit them to God, He will direct them through the Word, the Scriptures. And I believe in the providential directing of God in Romans 8, where Paul says that all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and to those who are called according to His purpose. If I will commit my life to Him, commit my life to His providence in all of my ways, trusting Him, He will direct my paths in what is best for my life.
And that's the role of a child, is to allow the father to guide and direct the path. My son doesn't always understand. My daughter is even worse. She's 4 years younger than him. And so she will hear that it's bedtime and she will cry and she will be so upset. But mama and daddy know if we don't put her to bed and she does not get enough sleep, she will have a worse day tomorrow than if she stays up late tonight. And there will be a consequence for that decision. My son, when he was that age, had the same problem. Though he doesn't like going to bed still, he understands that we're trying to help you. And I think sometimes, just like the devil did all the way back in the Garden of Eden, he comes in with this mindset of God's trying to hold you back. God doesn't want you to have what He knows that you would enjoy. He doesn't want you to have all that you could have. And so don't trust Him to direct your paths. Let me guide you, and I'll get you where you need to be. And yet every time we see that happen, the devil ends up just destroying us, not helping us. And when we finally are realizing, as we said a minute ago with that word trust, that I yield, then my paths will be directed in a way that I will see things come to pass that are quite impressive. You mentioned providential working of God, and though there's hardly a time when we can point to a situation and say that was definitely providence, we can certainly look back on some things and go, I wonder if it wasn't, because that's something that is easy to see when life seems to be going so poorly around us, and yet it all works out in the end. Just like you read from Romans 8, all things work together for good. Even when something bad is happening, good can come from it. And years ago in local work, we had a congregation of some black brethren that burned down, the building did. And we went to them and said, we want you to come worship with us. This is something we can do to correct this. And in that moment, they were very frustrated. They'd lost their building. All these people that had been baptized there, been married in that building, all of that. But something horrible like that building burning down brought about something wonderful, because those members from that congregation came and we merged together to be the picture of Christ in the church that He wants. And now there is a congregation in Somerville, Tennessee that is exactly what God wanted from the beginning, together. And it came about from one of the most horrible tragedies that could ever happen to a congregation and losing their building. But all things can work together for good to those that love the Lord. There's a path that if we'll let Him direct, we'll get to our destination. And that's like the GPS that we follow. If I try to take the wrong turn, it may reroute me, but I don't know if you've ever done this or not, and then I'll stop talking and let Wayne say some stuff. But you ever been driving and you know you're going to the hotel first or the house, but you're going to stop at another place before you get to your destination, and the GPS doesn't know that you're doing that unless you tell it you are. And so as you make that wrong turn, the GPS starts going into overdrive saying, okay, you've gone the wrong way. Here's how to get you back on the right way. I think that's how God views us at times. We've gone the wrong way, and God's saying, okay, you're not going the way that I want you to do, but here's the path I've directed for you to get back on track if you'll just follow it and listen and obey it. Wayne, you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I was going to say the first part of that verse, in all your ways acknowledge him. When I think about our ways, your ways, he's saying to his son or to the younger person here, in all your ways acknowledge him, acknowledge God, in other words. But you got Lamentation 3, verse 40, let us search out and examine our ways and turn back to the Lord. The same ideas given there, 2 Corinthians 13:5, where we examine ourselves, whether we be in the faith. This examination, there has to be some introspection. I have to look within. I have to make sure that my ways are his ways. And so knowing, okay, if I will acknowledge then him as Father, him as God, him as the Creator, him as the one who directs my steps, then I'm more in line to follow certainly his way. The word direct is interesting, just doing a kind of a quick word study on it, but the idea of the idea of smoothness or straight or right, morally speaking, obviously. But even more so, there's a little nuance to that word that has the idea of being gentle, tractable, or an easy. He is going to make a more, I would use the word appropriate turn, appropriate way for you to go through those things. And it may not always feel gentle. It may not always be the smoothest route as the word is defined, but it's in the sense that he is going to help smooth the way. It's not that everything is going to be perfectly smooth. He is going to smooth your way as you go. And so he's going to make it more gentle. He's going to make it more manageable, probably is the better word there. Sure. In that way. If we do what? And that's the thing. If we acknowledge him, if we acknowledge his way, then the way will be smoother. The way will be more gentle ultimately. And you think about, again, kind of putting it in the setting of an older, wiser individual giving wise counsel to someone who's younger and going through these things, or going to be going through these things. This is sage wisdom for life. But certainly, and this is in a general sense, but certainly the spiritual aspect of this, examine yourselves whether you be in the faith, turning and acknowledging your ways and searching out and examining your ways so that you do what? So that you always turn back to the Lord.
Amen.
The idea that if we go out on our ways was Jeremiah that says, it's not in the way of man that walks to direct his own steps. Well, that's what we try to do in life. And yet we're to examine ourselves and actually turn to the Lord. And so if we're out there trying to do it on our own, we're not likely doing it the way that he wants us to do. And that's the idea that I get from this.
Yeah, it's never been promised that it would be easy. I remember growing up and hearing the song play on the car radio, I beg your pardon, I never promised you a rose garden. And how that song, though it's not written about Christianity, that it does convey the mindset of man that's born of woman is few days and full of trouble. And that's what life is. And it's the consequences of sin. And you mentioned the route may not be smoother, but it's more manageable. It kind of reminded me of if there's ever been an accident on the interstate and your GPS says, would you like to save an hour and 10 minutes by going this other way? Often saving that hour and 10 minutes actually adds to your trip time, though, in some fashion, because it's an extra 40-minute drive. But that 40 minutes saves you from sitting in traffic for an hour and 10 or longer. And so it's a rerouting of where you're at. And God says, essentially, I will never find a situation where I cannot reroute you. I will never have a situation come up where I go, I don't quite know what path to put you on and where to take you and how to put you where you need to be. He'll always do the right thing by directing us the way we need to go. We just have to be willing to take direction. Right. What else do you have, Brother Charles?
The thing is, we look at the idea that there is a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof is the way of death. So the ways that we might, I think Wayne alluded to that in Jeremiah 10:23, but It may seem that this is the right way to go to us, but we have to commit ourselves to the way of the Lord revealed in His Word. And sometimes we make course changes. We change the direction or the way we're going when we begin to conform our lives to the way God reveals to us in His Word. In Matthew chapter 7, there are two ways. There's a broad way, there's a narrow way. And we make the choice of which way we're going to be on, but it is through the will of God that we understand. And sometimes this narrow way, the straight and narrow way, may be difficult to follow, but I must be willing to submit and commit my life to the way that He wants me to go, to the way that He's revealed in His Word, remembering the great I am statement of Jesus, I am the way. And we follow the way of Christ by the direction He gives, His example, His teaching that we find in His Word. And when we commit to that, trusting in the Lord with all of our heart and being willing to follow the way that He reveals, that's going to be the safe way to travel.
That's right. And why would we have so many places in the Old and New Testament showing us that what happens when man goes their own way is destruction? The book of Judges is a great example. There's 3 different occasions in that book where it says there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. They went their own path, and there was nothing but chaos and destruction. It's 1 Samuel 8, if I'm remembering correctly, where the people clamor for a king, and they said, we want to be like the other nations. And Samuel is very downtrodden about that and upset, and God says something that I remember the first time I really read that as a minister and understood it, it just hits you like a ton of bricks. He says, they've not rejected you. They've rejected me. I was already their king, and they're saying they don't want me. It's not you, Samuel, that's the problem. It's me. They're saying I'm the issue. I'm not enough. And what ends up coming about from that is God's way of saying, if you don't want me directing your paths, so be it. But let me tell you how awful it will be if you don't let me do this. And from that point forward in 1 Samuel 8, when they hear Samuel's discussion about here's how much oppression this king will bring about to you, they still didn't say, you know what, actually, we've changed our minds. They said, bring it on. We'd love to, it's fine. And it reminded me of a story I heard as a young boy that my dad told. And I'm sure it's not an original story with him. I'm sure other preachers have told this, but of a nation where every 7 years a new king is installed. And during that 7 years that he reigns as king, he's allowed to do whatever he wants. If he wants your wife, she's now his wife. If he wants your money, it's now his. Whatever he wants, it's his for 7 years. At the end of those 7 years, the villagers and the people from that kingdom surround the king and brutally murder him. And then they select a new king. And unfortunately, you would think there would not be a single person after that would say, yeah, I want to be the king. But they continuously had new men stepping forward. So I'll be the king. It sounds great in the moment to have whatever you want. But when you know the cost, especially when you witness the cost right in front of you, to still say, yeah, I want to do that is the height of foolishness. And yet we do that, spiritually speaking, time and time again, where we direct our own paths. We see the end result is not what it should be. And we convince ourselves that, well, it's no fault of what I'm doing. God just needs to do something better for me. And God's saying, you need to let me direct your paths, and then something better will come. Either of you have something you want to close out with?
Psalm 77:13 says, your way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? And when we acknowledge God as our God, we're going to follow His way. The way is much better. The way is easier to follow. From a standpoint of it's laid out in front of us rather than trying to make our own way, understand, from our feeble minds and the questions that come up as trying to ask questions like why this, why should this happen to me, why does this happen to this individual, when that's the wrong question to be asking. Really, it's who can show a better way, and God certainly can do that.
That's right.
And I think it goes back to this one word at the beginning of verse number 5, trust. When we trust the Lord with all of our heart, whatever way we are walking through His Word, through His leading, it's going to be the best way. And we can trust Him knowing it's going to come out for the best.
That's right. Brother Charles, thank you for being with us. Wayne, I know you didn't have a choice. You had to be here, but we're glad you're here too. And when we come back on Thursday, we'll have Brother Charles sit down with us again, and we'll have another episode of Did That Really Happen? And you're going to notice a continued trend in the country that we're talking about from last episode of Did That Really Happen? Life is funny that way. It's a very small world, isn't it? And so we look forward to having the chance to do that. Don't forget, reach out to House. Tell them thank you for us, that they allowed us to be in their studios this week. You can find all of our content in the show notes below as how to locate us and find us and follow us. And until Thursday, take care and God bless.